stories in our weekend. We learned don't take unnecessary quits. We learned to quit while we are ahead. This one's a little different, but it's appropriate, I think. A guy was traveling for business, and he wanted to stop at one of those hotels that had the free breakfast and everything that he liked. And so he found one that he liked, and he checked in, and he went to his room that night, spent the night. That morning he got up and he got the paper and he started reading the newspaper that they have that's free right there. And it was just him. He was up real hard. It was just him and the young girl that was at the desk there that was looking over stuff and everything. And so he's reading the paper, and all of a sudden he hears this voice say, "My, that's a nice tie you're wearing today." He doesn't know where that's coming from. He puts the paper down. He looks over. There's nobody in the room except him and the girl at the desk. And so he looks at her to see if she said anything. She looks up and just kind of smiles at him, not knowing what's going on. So he thinks, that's weird. But he goes back to reading his paper. And a few minutes later, he hears a voice that says, "That shirt goes perfect with your eyes." He thinks, what is going on? So he puts the paper down and he looks up. The girl's over there writing something at the desk. Doesn't look like she's paying any attention to him. Doesn't know what in the world is happening. So he just goes back to reading his paper. He doesn't know what's happening. Third time, he hears a voice that says, "I am so glad that you are here today. You're the kind of customer we need." And finally, he just puts that paper down. He looks over at that girl and he says, "I know that you were talking to me." She says, "Talking?" He said, "Yeah, I'm sitting here. You're there. You're the only person here. And 3 times now, I have heard a voice say stuff to me." She said, "Well, what has the voice said?" He said, "Well, the first time the voice said, it's a nice tie. The second time the voice said, that shirt goes well." She said, "Oh, no, that's not me. That's not me." She said, "That's the donuts. They're complimentary." I don't know. It's bad. You have to endure one more of those. All right. We are going to be talking about the idea of an implication. Now, an implication is something that you don't see. It's not explicit. It's not put there right in front of you. But it's just as true as what is put in front of you. And you use the idea of implication all the time. Let's see how that works. In the book of Revelation, the Bible says that the gate of heaven will not be shut by day, and there is no night there. And so what's the implication of those two statements? Although it's not stated in the verse, what's the implication? The implication is the gate will never be shut. Now the text does not say the gate will never be shut. It says it doesn't get shut by day and there's no night. But then what do you know based on those two ideas? That the gate never gets shut. So an implication is something that is attached to an idea or a thought that even though a person might not have seen it yet, even though they might not have looked at it yet, it's still there and you can't get around it. It's absolutely just as true as the explicit statement of the gate will not be shut by day. Okay, we know it's not going to be shut by day. There's no night. Okay, and so therefore, it will never be shut. Well, I say that to say, beliefs have implications. And the beliefs that we've been looking at this weekend, the two primary divisions are the belief that God exists and the belief that God does not exist. Now, if you believe that God exists, there are some implications with that. If you say there's a supernatural, all-powerful being who is intelligent and is moral and put humans here on purpose, well, the implications with that are that means that you're morally responsible for the things that you do. That means that you have a purpose here in this life. The implications are very serious and good in a lot of ways. Now, if on the other hand you don't believe that there's a God, and you believe that this universe is a cosmic accident over 13.82 billion years, and you don't believe that there's any soul or spirit, well, that has some implications. That would mean there's no purpose in this life. That would mean that your life really ultimately is no more meaningful than broccoli or than a flea. That would mean that... So the implications for unbelief are pretty serious. And what I'm going to do this morning is we're going to look at basically the implications of atheism, or what we call the fruits of atheism. In the late 1880s, a man by the name of George Walser decided that he was going to found a town. He was going to name it Liberal, Missouri, and here was the charter for the town. You could not be a charter member of this particular town unless you said, I do not believe in God, I do not believe in heaven, I do not believe in hell, I don't believe in anything spiritual at all. Here was his thought. If we could get people that don't waste their time and energy on religion, and they don't think about spiritual stuff, they don't think about anything not physical, if they would just concentrate their resources on building their houses and building their businesses and thinking totally physically, then we would have the best possible society in the world. And that's what he said he was going to do. He was going to make the best possible society that anybody had ever seen, and he was going to found that society on unbelief. And he said, when you found a society on unbelief, it is the best society that can be found. And that's what he did. Liberal Missouri, he named the streets Walser Avenue after himself, of course, and then there was Darwin Drive after Charles Darwin, and there was Ingersoll Lane after Robert Ingersoll, the agnostic and the man who wrote several different treatises and essays against Christianity. And so that was what he planned to do, and that's exactly what he did. Now, what do you think happened to Liberal Missouri? Do you think it flourished like he initially planned? Do you think that when there are a lot of people who focus solely on the physical and they don't think anything about a golden rule, and they don't think anything about their moral obligations, and they just think about how they can make more money and how they can build a bigger hotel or house, and well, I think you would probably quickly realize that Liberal Missouri turned out not to be exactly what Walser thought. In fact, this is a photocopy of the actual 1885 article that was written by a man named Clark Braden. Clark Braden, as I understand it, was a member of the Lord's Church. And he was a traveling preacher and debater and evangelist. And he had heard about Liberal Missouri and wanted to see what was going to happen to Liberal. And so he went through the city, town, it wasn't the city, but he went through the town. And then he wrote this article for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And there in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, he said, an infidel experiment. The colony of Liberal in this state, a practical experiment in infidelity. He said, okay, this is a practical experiment. They're putting it into practice, and what happens? And so he just wrote about what he saw in Liberal Missouri. He said, number one, everybody uses bad language and cusses. All the little kids do, all the women do, all the men do. It's all across the board. Everybody cusses. He said, number two, drinking is rampant and drunkenness is all over the place. In fact, he said everybody drinks too, especially the women and the men. He said the hotels have become brothels and the property value has plunged so low that most people want out of Liberal Missouri, but they've invested so much money in it that they can't get their money out and they're stuck. Well, of course, the hotel owner, at least one of them, didn't take that sitting down, and so he sued Clark Braden for $25,000 in 1885. Now, if I understand, $25,000 in 1885 was probably equivalent to several million now. But Clark Braden's statements were so dead on to the facts that Clark Braden never had to appear in court, that the man had to pay all of the court costs, and the case was thrown out immediately because that's exactly what was going on in Liberal Missouri. Now, here's what I find very interesting. I got to visit Liberal Missouri. Several years ago now, I was speaking in Lamar, Missouri, and I was talking about this. They said, oh yeah, Liberal Missouri's just right down the road. I said, really? They said, yeah, so those pictures are from Liberal Missouri. I took them myself. And right now in Liberal, Missouri, there are, saw a population of 700 or something. There are, I think, 24 different church groups that meet in Liberal, Missouri. It's the eeriest little township I think I've ever seen. Because when you drive through, it looks like a Western Main Street movie. The windows are those big saloon-type windows, and not much of the look apparently has changed. But in what it looks like used to be saloons, you have little church groups meeting. There's 24 different church groups, I think it was. They said 24 meeting in this one tiny little town that had 700 people in it. It's changed very drastically from the time that George Walser started. But here's what's interesting. As you go to the cemetery of Liberal, Missouri is arranged unlike any cemetery I've ever seen. In that it's all in a big circle, and the graves are pointed around in a big circle Walser later realized, hold on just a second. This practical experiment in infidelity showed me something, and what it showed me was unbelief doesn't work. And George Walser got in contact with the teachings of Jesus Christ, as I understand it, and he said, I was absolutely terribly wrong about that, and I certainly don't want to be buried in a cemetery in Liberal that is full of unbelievers and people who are not looking toward the resurrection. And he said, I want to be buried somebody else. And so his tomb is in Lamar, Missouri, 45 minutes away. That's his tomb. Lieutenant Colonel George Walser, born at Aurora, Indiana, passed away at Liberal, the town he founded May 1st, 1910. He completely changed, as I understand it, his life after realizing, hold on, I've made a pretty big mistake here. And so, you see, when you put unbelief into practice, the practical outgrowth of that belief is very, very detrimental. And I'm going to show you why that's the case. But before I show you why that's the case, I'm going to read you a statement from a man who wrote an essay titled, Why I Am Not a Christian. Now, here's his assessment of Christianity. He says, Christianity, as soon as it conquered the state, put an end to the gladiatorial shows. Not because they were cruel, but because they were idolatrous. The result, however, was to diminish the widespread education and cruelty by which the Roman populace and Roman towns were degraded. Christianity also did much to soften the lot of slaves. It established charity on a large scale. It inaugurated hospitals. Although the great majority of Christians failed lamentably in Christian charity, the idea remained alive and in every age inspired some notable saints. In a Newfoundland, it passed over modern liberalism and remains the inspiration of much that is most hopeful in our somber world. Okay, now Bertrand Russell, if you have studied much about Bertrand Russell, you might know that he's one of the most outspoken agnostic unbelievers against Christianity of his day. Like I said, he wrote a very, very famous essay titled Why I'm Not a Christian. But when you ask Bertrand Russell, what happens when people become Christians and act like Christians? Oh, well, you stop gladiatorial shows. You establish charity on a large scale. You soften a lot of slaves. You inaugurate hospitals. And the ideal of Christianity remains the inspiration behind much that is most hopeful in our somber world. You mean to tell me, Mr. Russell, that if people would act like Jesus told them to act, the world would be a better place? Yeah. That's what he's saying. And now you and I both know that. No. Wouldn't you like to live in a society and a community where people do to other people what they want done to them? Wouldn't you like to live in a society that has the mind of Christ that you read about in Philippians chapter 2, where it says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each one of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. Wouldn't you like to live in a society where people were listening to these statements that Paul made in Romans, where he said that we should love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, forgiving one another, as Jesus Christ also forgave you? You know, wouldn't that be a great one? What if everybody followed the instructions in Ephesians where they let no corrupt communication proceed out of their mouth, but they only said stuff that was good for necessary building up of the hearers? That'd be exciting. What if you lived in a place where you had people that, the people who used to steal, they stole no more, but they labored with their hands, giving to those people that needed things from the work that they did? You know, you can go through the list and think, you know, if everybody acted like Jesus told us to act, this would be an exciting place to live. The implications of Christianity are you behave in a way that represents God to the world, and the mind of Christ is a mind of servant leadership that blesses everybody that it touches. But that's not the implication of atheism. In fact, if you will go to Psalm 14:1, you'll hear this statement: the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Now, we talked about Friday night what a foolish proposition atheism is. That you have to get rid of, you have to jettison, you have to throw out massive amounts of legitimate evidence to ever arrive at the conclusion there's no God. There is a mound, a pile, a massive amount of evidence that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt God exists. But lots of times we stop right there in Psalm 14:1, where we say and read, the fool has said in his heart there is no God. But if you will look at the next few verses, what the biblical text is doing for you is giving you a commentary on what happens when people don't believe in God and they act like that. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable things. There is none who does good, no, not one. And what he's showing you is, if a person doesn't believe in God and then starts acting like they don't believe in God, what happens in that situation? They are corrupt. They have done abominable things. There is none who does good, no, not one. That's commentary on somebody saying they don't believe in God. And so let's look into this idea of the fruits of atheism. The number one problem with atheism is there are implications that attach to the belief that are very detrimental to any society. This man's name is William Frohman. He was an avid atheist. In fact, he was speaking at the Darwin Day, 1998. This was from the speech that he gave then. He said, naturalistic evolution has clear consequences that Charles Darwin understood perfectly. He said, number one, no God for having exists. Number two, no life after death exists. Now look at number three. Number three, no ultimate foundation for ethics exists. Number four, no meaning in life exists. Number five, no meaning in free will exists. Now, each of those you could have a very good discussion on, but we're just going to stop right there at number three and see what he means when he says no foundation for ethics. According to atheism, you are not any different than animals that preceded you. You might be a little more intelligent. You might have an opposable thumb. But as far as your value goes, you are just a higher evolved mammal that fits in the spectrum of all animals. And so as you start looking at that, when one person evolves to a certain intelligence and another person evolves to a certain intelligence, then who is to say that what this person decides they want to do is any more right or wrong than what this person decides they want to do? And you see, as you start looking at that, if you have a dog and that dog steals somebody's steak off of their grill, you don't try the dog for theft. You don't arrest him for robbery. You just think to yourself, oh, that's how dogs do. Now, you might try to make sure that next time they're grilling, you lock your dog up in the fence in your backyard so he doesn't get to their grill, etc. But you don't think the dog has done anything more than wrong because he's a dog. Well, if atheism is true and there is no God and there is no soul and there's nothing supernatural, there's no heaven, there's no hell, well, if a dog steals somebody's steak, he's done nothing morally right or wrong necessarily. So what about a person? You see, as that idea plays out, the fact that atheism cannot answer moral questions because it can't say something is morally right or morally wrong. Continue with me. You'll see how this plays out. Charles Darwin says, a man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem like the best ones to him. He says, if you don't believe in God, you don't think there's a heaven and hell, how do you then decide what's right for you? And his answer? Whatever you feel like doing, do it. So, suppose you go down to the steakhouse and you order a 12-ounce ribeye steak, and the person right across the table from you orders a 12-ounce ribeye steak, and the waitress brings both of your steaks to you, and yours looks like about 8 ounces, and it's not cooked the way you want it. And the person across the table from you looks about like a 16-ounce, and it looks like it's cooked perfect, and you're bigger than that person, and all of a sudden you start feeling really, really hungry and really stronger than that person. And so you walk over to that person and you say, hey, I want your steak. The person says, you can't have my steak. This is the one they brought me. You say, well, I ordered And 12-ounce ribeye or whatever, and mine looks like it's an 8-ounce ribeye. Yours looks much bigger. I'm a bigger person than you. I need more protein. Give me your steak. The guy says, no, I'm not giving you my steak. You can't have my steak. So inside of you, you have an urge that says, punch this guy in the face and take it. Okay, so you do. You punch him in the face, you take his steak. Now, according to Charles Darwin, what have you done? Nothing morally right or wrong. That's the impulse, the instinct that seemed the strongest to you at the time. And so you just acted on that impulse. Now, that sounds almost humorous to us, doesn't it? Of course, nobody walks over and punches anybody in the face and takes the face. Oh, yeah, they do that kind of thing all the time, don't they? Whole nations will go across the border and take over an entire other nation and plan to basically punch every nation in the face that they can get their hands on. People on a regular basis do those kinds of things, and they fill our prison systems to capacity level. Why? Because they're just doing things that seem like the strongest impulses to them. Well, are they doing anything wrong? Now, here's where the atheist has the problem. Because the atheist will say, well, we don't want that done in our community. So we're going to put rules in place so that police will do things to those people if they do this. Okay, now that's not the question. Are they doing anything morally wrong? Well, it's not good for society, because if everybody goes around punching everybody in the face, then you're going to have a lot of black eyes and busted noses. But no. Are they doing anything morally wrong? Well, from an atheist standpoint, you can't say they're doing anything morally wrong. You can't say it's wrong. You can say you don't like it. You can say you don't want it done in your neighborhood. You can say, I'm going to go to restaurants where people that generally punch people in the face aren't frequenting those very much. You just can't say there's anything morally wrong. In fact, as you continue, Dan Barker, in his debate with Peter Payne, he said, there are no actions in and of themselves that are always right or wrong. It depends on the context. You cannot name an action that's always absolutely right or wrong. I can think of an exception in every case. Now, as he said that, one of the students that was there at the debate at this particular university came up and said, okay, would it ever be right to wake up? And he said, well, some of the ideas, they're kind of outlandish, but he said, yes, it would be morally right if aliens came down and said they're going to kill everybody in the world unless you did that to a person, then yeah, you would need to do that to save everybody in the world. Okay, now I debated in 1999, and I said, you said that in 1995, what about 2 people? He said, yeah, you would need to do that to 2 people to save everybody. I said, what about 2,000? He said, yeah, you need to do that to 2,000 people to save everybody in the world. I said, what about 2 million? He said, yes, it'd be your moral obligation to do that. Now, you'd be saving everybody's physical life. And he looked out at the audience. And the audience, out of the 550 people that were there, probably 400 of them were Christian. New Testament Christian, member of the church. And he could see that they could not believe his answer. And so he looked out just almost angry, and he looked over at me, and he said, but you thank me for that. You thank me for doing that because I would have saved you. Now remember what Charles Darwin said. A person who doesn't have an idea of a future retribution or reward can have really only to make his decision based on his physical life. And so he's thinking from the atheistic standpoint, I just saved your life. Well, no, you just violated an absolute moral standard that I would never countenance under any circumstance, regardless of what's going to happen to my physical life, because my physical life is not all there is. And so I looked at him and I said, well, I'd never thank you for that, because I know I've got a better place to go than this. And boy, you can tell him this man. He said, you don't know that? And I said, yes, I do. Now, what would keep a person from saving their physical life and doing something immoral like that? Only the understanding and knowledge that there is something better, something more, something higher than this physical life. And so, when you see people throughout the course of history sacrificing their physical lives for an ideal, for a purpose, for a meaning that is greater than their physical lives, according to atheism, that just doesn't make any sense at all, because there's nothing past this physical. But if there is something past this physical, then they've absolutely done something terribly immoral and wrong. And so they can hardly even get in a conversation about morality, because they just don't really even understand it, because all they think is this physical life. What shall a man get if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will men give in exchange for his soul? Well, the point there is a single human soul is worth more than all of the physical material in this whole world. And see, atheism just can never even really fathom it. So you look at a question like abortion and atheism. Okay, where would somebody get the idea that it would be all right to kill unborn children? Of course, you could never get that from the Bible. The Bible consistently paints a picture of, from the point of conception, every single human being is recognized by God as a human being in utero, after they are born, from the very point of conception. Always, in every case. The words that are used to describe John the Baptizer who jumps in his mother Elizabeth's womb is the exact same word that was used to describe Jesus after he was born. A child is a child when they are in their mother's womb. A child is a child outside of his or her mother's womb. From conception, people are recognized as people throughout the entire Bible. That's how God sees people. Now, where would you get the idea that it would be all right to kill unborn children? You couldn't get it from the Bible. You couldn't get it from any understanding of God and his value of human life. But there is a place where you could get it. Charles Darwin said there's no difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculty. Okay, basically what's he trying to say? That humans and animals are on the same plane. Now, let me explain to you what all of the atheists and evolutionists would recognize. Okay, humans are more intelligent than animals. They all recognize that. But the person you're sitting by, you might be more intelligent than that person. You know, if me and my wife are sitting on this pew, my wife would be more intelligent than I am. And in fact, then I would say, okay, she's more intelligent. But it's not a different kind of intelligence. And what I mean is, she might know more about certain things, but we both have human-type intelligence. Well, what the atheist is saying is, all right, you'll be sitting here, and there'll be a chimpanzee here, and a dog here, and a pig here. Now, you can do math better than the chimpanzee. But the chimpanzee has some intelligence too. So even though you'll score higher on an IQ test, it's not a different kind of intelligence. You're just smarter. And so, because you're just smarter than animals, well, yeah, you can do better on tests and you can build bridges better, etc. But it doesn't make you any different from them. You just happen to be smarter. And so if you happen to be smarter than the person sitting next to you, well, it doesn't make you more important. It doesn't make you more valuable. It doesn't mean morally you have some better option. You just happen to be smarter. And so what Charles Darwin is saying is, yeah, we're smarter, but ultimately there's no difference. You just do better on a test. Okay, well, what would that mean? Well, it means that they just really have to recognize humans for what they say that they are. And they say that they are higher animals. And so Barbara Burke says, among some animal species, infant killing appears to be a natural practice. Could it be natural for humans to do a trait inherited from our primate ancestors? Charles Darwin noted. In the descent of man, that infanticide has been probably the most important of all checks on population growth throughout most of human history. Okay, if animals kill their babies, and you are just an animal, then what does that mean you could do, morally speaking? And Barbara Burke says, I mean, we look at those animals. My parents had a dog years and years ago. My dad was in the coon hunt. He had a coon dog that was, she was high power. She would find a coon, you let her out, and she would find a coon. Now, sometimes that was problematic, because if it meant she was going to run 5 miles to find a coon, she would not come in until she found one. And so they had to get one of those GPS tracking devices on her. But she was a great coon dog. She had a pedigree as long as you're on. And she was going to have babies that, if I understand it right, the babies were going to be worth $1,000 a piece. And so the first litter, she did. She had, if I remember right, she had 12 puppies. And man, my dad called up and he said, man, we got 12 puppies on the ground right now. She killed all of them but one. Because she didn't think she could raise any more puppies than one puppy. Next litter, she had 8. This time, there wasn't so much excitement around it because we waited to see what she would do. She killed all of them but one. She, in her mind, for some reason, thought she could raise one puppy, and that was it. Now, Barbara Burke says, you know, you look at animals, and you see that's tragic, that they don't really that's all she thought she had the resources to take care of. But you don't convict that dog as a murderer. And if humans are just on the same plane as animals, well, then when we kill our unborn children, what? You see the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is it is an absolute failure to recognize that there is and always has been a fundamental between humans and animals. And God made that difference known throughout the text, and intuitively we all recognize that when he says that he created male and female in his own image. Now, in his own image is a statement that is only ever applied to the creation of human beings. And in Genesis chapter 9, after the flood, God says to Noah and his family, you can eat any of the animals that you want. All of them, everything that creeps and flies and runs, you can eat every animal. You can kill it and eat it. But you do not kill humans. Because humans are made in God's image, and any person who kills a human will be called into judgment for that because they are fundamentally different than animals. Well, according to atheism, if you get rid of God, you get rid of his image. And so you throw out the only thing that separates humans from animals. Our forefathers understood this very well. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among those rights are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where does a human being get the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? From his or her Creator. Now what happens if you get the Creator out of the picture? Well, you throw the fundamental difference between humans and animals out of the picture as well, and you get rid of all real human rights. Now, what you think should happen is that when atheists like this stand up and say, you know what, humans are just like him, you would think the people who are listening would immediately realize, no, something's wrong here. That's not right. I don't want to have any part in that. In fact, when I got Dan Martin to admit that, oh yeah, 2 million people, I thought for sure that's all you needed to do. Naively, that's what I thought. I thought if you could get one of the leading atheists to say it would be your moral obligation to do this to 2 million people, game over. That's it. We have just come. Because they basically said, well, no, we don't like it. I know it's how it is, but according to atheism, that's just how it is. Yeah, that's not how it is. You are valuable. You do have rights. You have been created by God in his image and have a purpose in this life. You are not an animal. Is it any surprise to you that as we have taken God out of the school systems and the educational programs of our nation, more young people have decided they don't have a real purpose in their life, and they have taken automatic weapons into their school systems, and they have shot as many people as they can and then killed themselves on the way out? Is it surprising to us? If you teach a kid that he evolved from and is an animal, what are they going to act like? Animal. There's no higher purpose or meaning in their life. Well, continue with me. Now this guy, and I want you to listen to this close, and there's a reason I put him up here. He is recognized in the world as the leading ethicist in the world. Richard Dawkins, who's the leading atheist in the world, interviewed him in a YouTube video, and he said, Peter Singer, I believe you're the most moral man that I've ever met. Okay, Peter Singer is an atheist who writes books on how to determine the right thing to do in a certain situation, ethics. Now here's what he said. He says, if we compare a severely defective human infant with a non-human animal, dog and pig for example, we'll often find the non-human to have superior capacity. Only the fact that the defective infant is a member of the species Homo sapiens leads it to be treated differently from the dog or pig. He says, why in the world in the past have we kept humans alive and we have done different things to dogs and pigs? He said, there's only one reason we've ever done that, and that's because the human is a human. Now read the last sentence. Species membership alone, however, is not morally relevant. He said, you shouldn't make decisions based on the idea that the human is a human according to the atheistic framework. Well, how should you make them? Well, he's saying you should make them based on which one's going to be more beneficial to society. Let's say you have a disabled infant that is going to cost society resources. You're going to have medical care for it for years and years and years. And you've got a German Shepherd over here that would make a really good drug dog. Okay, historically, we've kept the human alive at a great cost to society, and we have done something else to the German Shepherd, if we've only got the resources to keep one of these two alive, we've gotten rid of the German Shepherd because, for no reason, then this human is human. But he says, we need to stop making decisions based on the humanness of something. And what does he mean by that? If we can put aside the obsolete and erroneous notion of the sanctity of all human life, we might start looking at human life like it really is. You see, if you don't believe in God, there's no sanctity of human life. Well, what do you mean you might start looking at it like it really is? Nevertheless, Peter Singer says, the main point is clear. Killing a disabled infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person. Very often it's not wrong at all. What are the fruits of atheism? What are the implications of atheism? Implication of atheism is, number one, that human life loses all its moral value, and it becomes a test of, hey, what good is this human going to be to our society? Is this human going to be smart enough to help society? Are they going to build anything? Or are we going to have to pour resources into them? And if we start having to pour resources into them, they're going to start costing us stuff. And hey, since according to the atheistic idea, there's no soul or spirit or moral value whatsoever, then we need to just save the stuff that doesn't cost us stuff. Continue with me and listen to this statement. Like I said, I would think that when statements like this were made, that people would run screaming away from the idea of atheism. And I think sometimes they just don't know that these statements are made. James Rachel says, if it was severe brain damage, even if it survives for many years, it may never learn to speak. Its mental powers may never rise above a primitive level. In fact, its psychological capacities may be markedly inferior to those of a typical rhesus monkey. You might have a rhesus monkey that's smarter than some babies. In that case, moral individualism would see no reason to prefer its life over the monkey's. He says you might have a monkey that's smarter than some humans because of defects of some sort, and so why in the world would you keep the human life? Now, listen closely to what he says there. Some unfortunate humans, perhaps because they've suffered brain damage, they're not rational agents. What are we to say about them? The natural conclusion, according to the doctrine we are considering, would be that their status is that of mere animals. And perhaps we should go on to conclude that they may be used as non-human animals are used, as laboratory subjects or as food. Now, if I understand it, James Rachels, in his book Created from Animals, notice his title. How did I start this discussion out? The implication of something? The moral implications of dogmas. Folks, that is a moral implication of the idea of unbelief. And so is it surprising to us that in Psalm 14:1 it says, the fool has said in his heart there is no God, and then the commentary on that is, they are corrupt. They have done abominable things. There is none who does good, no, not one. When you act out atheism, it is the most immoral, horrible, tragic, terrible, murderous, bad philosophy for life ever conceived of. Now, stop right there. And you say, well, hold on a second. Wait just a second, Kyle. I mean, I know some people who are unbelievers, and they're really nice guys. In fact, my neighbor, you might say, is an atheist, and my neighbor would do anything for me, and yeah, we don't believe the same, but my neighbor is an unbeliever, and he's still really nice and really moral. Okay, that's true. You can have a really moral, atheistic person. And somebody might say, well, I know a guy, he claims to be a Christian, he lives right down my road, and he's a Christian, but he does all kinds of terrible things. He has committed adultery on his wife, and he does a bunch of stuff, and in fact, he calls himself a Christian, but he acts in a way that's not a thing representative of Christianity. Does that happen sometimes? Oh yeah, absolutely. So just because a person says they are something, doesn't mean they act in line with their belief. And so lots of times the skeptical community will say, well, hold on a second. Well, what about the Salem witch trials? What about the Crusades, where people in the name of Christ marched over to the Holy Lands and killed Muslims by the thousands, and the witch trials where they persecuted and drowned witches? Is that what you're talking about with Christianity? No, that's not Christianity at all. In fact, take the Crusades there for a minute. As you look at what happened in the Crusades, you remember when Jesus was standing in front of Pilate, and Pilate said, are you a king then? And Jesus said, yeah, I'm a king. That's the reason that I came into this world. That's why I was put here. He said, but my kingdom is not of this world. If it were of this world, my people would fight. He said, I'm a totally different kind of king than anything you've ever seen. It's not a kingdom like having a bunch of soldiers that go into a place and start a war. Oh, you mean to tell me that the Crusades would be a direct violation and in complete opposition to everything Jesus Christ taught about how his kingdom was free? Yeah. And so just because you call yourself a Christian doesn't mean you are behaving in accordance with the implications of the teaching of Christianity. Jesus made that clear when he said, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. Now, just because you call yourself an unbeliever does not mean that you are acting in the proper, well, you can't even say proper, it doesn't mean that you are playing out the implications of your unbelief. So when an unbeliever does something nice, you could say, okay, why would you do that? Well, it just seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing according to do. Well, just the right thing. Okay, based on what standard is that? Well, it's just kind of always how I felt like you need to do. Okay, how you felt. Well, what if I felt? You see the problem? They're doing something that's moral, but it is basically the opposite of the implication of unbelief. And so, as you continue to look at these ideas, a man by the name of Eric Bianchi, in 2006, he was given the prestigious award as the premier scientific educator in the state of Texas. The state of Texas is huge. And this is a very prestigious award. He is a reptile scientist. He studies reptiles. And he stood up in this crowd of 400 people. Before he stood up, he went over to the cameraman. He told the cameraman not to film what he was about to say. And he stood up and gave a speech in which he said, humans are no better than bacteria, and humans are causing terrible problems across the globe, and we need to eliminate 90% of them in order for the other organisms to have room to thrive. Somebody then asked him, what would you suggest would be a good option for eliminating 9 out of 10 people? He said something like airborne Ebola virus would be a good candidate to wipe out people pretty quick, but there wouldn't be much of a mess, and you could clean it up later, and it would be gone fairly quickly. So if we just had a good strain of Ebola virus, we could get rid of 9 out of 10 people, and the world would be a better place. You know, what you hope would happen after something like that is the 400 science educators that are listening to that would have the sense to walk out, the sense to be angry, the sense to be appalled and indignant at the idea that the way to solve the world's problem is kill 9 out of 10 people. That's not what happened. In fact, what happened was they stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And I thought it was interesting when somebody asked Dr. Bianca, okay, you've advocated to kill 9 out of 10 people, are you going to be one of the 9? You see, that's a pretty powerful question. Because everybody deep down inside of them knows that there's something different about humans. That we are not higher animals, that we have value that no other organism on the planet has, and that we really have meaning and purpose in our life. But the only way you can possibly ever say that humans have meaning and purpose and are valuable is if you start the discussion with, in the beginning, God created. When you start the discussion there, well, the fruits of Christianity and belief in God are very sweet, they're very productive, they're very wholesome. But the fruits of atheism are very, very bitter. Thank you very much for being here this morning. We have had another good session. This is, I guess, our 5th one for our sermon. We'll have our final session, our 6th session. And I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for making this a part of your life this day on Sunday, the Lord's Day.